We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Can All Be Together by Gordon Cook and Alan East. In July 1976, my wife Mary, son Jonathan 6, daughter Suzanne 7, and I set sail from Plymouth, England to duplicate the round the world voyage made 200 years earlier by Captain James Cook. Means, here the author started his journey to copy, to replicate, to duplicate the round the world voyage which was made by Captain James Cook 200 years ago. For the longest time, Mary and I, then he introduces himself that he was a 37-year-old businessman, had dreamt of sailing in the wake of the famous explorer, and for the past 16 years, we had spent all our leisure time honing our seafaring skills in British waters. Means they perfected their skills of traveling through sea. Our boat, Wave Walker, a 23-meter, 30-ton wooden-hulled beauty, means it was a beautiful boat. Its length was 23 meters and its weight was 30 ton and its name was Wave Walker. And that was professionally built, had been professionally built. And we had spent months fitting it out and testing it in the roughest weather we could find. And whatever roughest weather they could find, they tested it. The first leg of our planned 3 years. They had planned this journey for 3 years, and the total distance they would cover was 1,05,000 kilometers. And their first part, leg means part, passed pleasantly. As we sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. Okay, then they went to the Cape Town, that is the end of African continent. So there, before heading east, we took on two crewmen. Then they hired or they had taken with them, they took with them two crewmen, American Larry Vigil and Swiss. Swiss means a person from Switzerland, Herb Siesler, to help us tackle one of the world's roughest seas, the Southern Indian Ocean. So on our second day out of Cape Town, we began to encounter means face, strong gales. Gales means winds. Strong winds, they started facing. For the next few weeks, they blew continuously. Gales did not worry me, but the size of the waves was alarming. Up to 15 meters, as high as our main mast. Mast is the main pole. So, December 25th, they found themselves 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town. So, they had traveled 3,500 kilometers away from Cape Town. Despite atrocious weather, we had a wonderful holiday complete with a Christmas tree. And 25th December, you know what is that? That is a Christmas. So they celebrated. They stopped at one place putting their anchor and they celebrated a holiday. Okay, so they had a Christmas tree with them. So they decorated it and they celebrated Christmas. And now New Year's Day, that is 1st of January. So New Year's Day saw no improvement in the weather, but we reasoned that it had to change soon. But they thought that it would change soon. And it did change for the worse. But nothing good happened. Something worse had happened now. What had happened on 2nd January at the daybreak, at the beginning of the day, on 2nd January, the waves were gigantic. Gigantic means very large, very huge, very big. So we were sailing with only a small storm jib. They had very small storm jib they could put on and were still making 8 knots and still the distance covered was 8 sea miles per hour. As the ship rose to top of each wave, we could see endless, enormous seas rolling towards us. And when they were rolling on each wave, they could see that more waves are about to come. And the screaming of the wind and sprays was painful to the ears. To slow the boat down, we dropped the storm jib, and now they dropped the storm jib also, and lashed a heavy mooring rope in a loop across the stern. Then we double lashed everything, went through our life raft drill, attached lifelines, turned oilskins. Oilskins are nowadays they are made up of synthetic material, but earlier that was tight fitting clothes and they were made waterproof. Okay, and life jackets and waited, and they were waiting. Let this disaster come. So the first indication of impending disaster came at about 6 p.m. and that did come with an ominous silence. Now, ominous means something hinting to the future, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but most often it is considered for bad. So, ominous silence was there, like before any disaster is about to happen. The wind dropped and the sky immediately grew dark. Then came a growing roar and an enormous cloud towered aft of the ship. Aft means back of the ship. With horror, I realized that it was not a cloud, but a wave like no other I had ever seen. It appeared perfectly vertical and almost twice the height of the other waves with a frightful breaking crest. Crest is the top of the wave. The roar increased to a thunder as the stern moved up the face of the wave. And for a moment I thought we might ride over it, but then a tremendous explosion shook the deck. Then the deck was shaken by a very big explosion. A torrent of green and white water broke over the ship. My head smashed into the wheel. And what is the wheel of a ship? Are there any wheels in a ship? Yes, that is steering wheel. So he was steering, but so on a ship, we are not steering like a car. It is like this, like very big steering wheel is there. So, and then he bumped his head into the wheel, and I was aware of flying overboard and sinking below the waves. I accepted my approaching death. Then he surrendered to his death. He thought that he was about to die, and I was losing consciousness. I felt quite peaceful. When death is there, then one feels, okay, let it be. So he surrendered. But unexpectedly, my head popped out of the water. A few meters away, Wave Walker was near capsizing. Capsizing means drowning. Her mass, rather sinking, I should say, capsizing means sinking. So her mass, because this is personification here, her mass almost horizontal. Then a wave hurled her upright, but another wave came and then it made it straight, upright. My lifeline is that rope. One end is tied to the belt and the other is tied to the ship. And that is lifeline, not of that KBC. That is metaphorically said lifeline. But here this lifeline is real lifeline. That is a rope. Suppose somebody is into the water, then can climb through that rope. That is lifeline. So there was some rigidity there. Earlier there was looseness, so nothing was there because the ship was also sinking. But now since the ship is upright, so now there was some tightness in the rope, so he could go up. So now he grabbed the guardrails and sailed through the air into the wave walker's main boom. Boom is the bar which uh, keeps the sails. Okay, to keep the sails, these bars are there. That is that one. Okay, so then a wave hurled her upright. My lifeline jerked out. Taut means rigid. I grabbed the guardrails and sailed through the air into Wave Walker's main boom. Subsequent waves means further waves tossed me around the deck like a rag doll. Now you can imagine that suppose there is a doll made up of cloth and you make it wet in water and then if it comes over the ship. And now you can imagine all the things. Ribs were broken, teeth were broken, everything was broken. So my lips, my left ribs cracked, my mouth filled with blood and broken teeth. Somehow I found the wheel. He managed to find the wheel, lined up the stern for the next wave, and hung on. So he made the ship straight and then he waited. Water, water everywhere. I could feel that the ship had water below. But I dared not abandon. Abandon means to leave the wheel to investigate. Suddenly, the front hatch. Hatch is like a door in the floor. Okay, if it opens and there are stairs. So now here comes his wife Mary. And that front hatch was thrown open and Mary appeared. We are sinking. She screamed. The decks are smashed. We are full of water. Then the author shouted, "Take the wheel." I shouted as I scrambled. He searched for the hatch. Larry and Herb were pumping like madmen. Broken timbers. Timber means the wood, furniture, wood of furniture. Okay, so whichever is used for the ship like that, that is timber here. So broken timbers hung at crazy angles. The whole starboard side is the right side of the ship, and that is most important part. Okay, because steering wheel is also there, so all the controls are there. Okay, radio system is also there. So whole starboard side bulged inwards. So like if you are in a room, so if it came inside, so bulged inward, clothes, crockery, char, tins, and toys sloshed about in deep water. I half swam, half crawled into the children's cabin. "Are you all right?" I asked. Yes, they answered from an upper bunk. Bunk is like a berth in a train. "But my head hurts a bit," said Sue, pointing to a big bump above her eyes. I had no time to worry about bumped heads. So after finding a hammer, screws, and canvas, I struggled back on deck because he wanted to mend something, repair some broken part. So with the starboard side bashed open, we were taking water with each wave that broke over us. If I couldn't make some repairs, we would surely sink. So some repairs were to made immediately. Somehow I managed to stretch canvas and secure waterproof hatch covers across the gaping holes. Some water continued to stream below, but most of it was now being deflected over the side. More problems arose when our hand pumps started to block up. So they started to block up with the debris. S is silent, and debris is common word which you might have heard. You might have heard this word. So debris floating around the cabins and the electric pump short-circuited. The water level rose threateningly. Back on deck, I found that our two spare hand pumps had been wrenched overboard, along with the foresail, the jib, the dinghies, and the main anchor. Then I remembered we had another electric pump under the chart room floor. I connected it to an outpipe and was thankful to find that it worked. The night dragged on with an endless, bitterly cold routine of pumping, steering, and working the radio. Now, that Mayday calls. You must have heard this Mayday calls. These are the calls to connect somebody if somebody is in danger. Like recent plane crash in Ahmedabad was also trying to have Mayday calls connected to the base station. Similarly, here these people were trying to connect with anybody around. So they were making calls, or they were sending some messages on radio. If there is nearby, please help us. So that is called Mayday calls. The night dragged on with an endless, bitterly cold routine of pumping, steering, and working the radio. We were getting no replies to our Mayday calls, but nobody was there, which was not surprising in this remote corner of the world because they were in the remote corner of the world. Sue's head had swollen alarmingly. She had two enormous black eyes, and now she showed us a deep cut on her arm. When I asked why she hadn't made more of her injuries before this, she replied, I didn't want to worry you when you were trying to save us all. By morning, January 3rd, the pumps had the water level sufficiently under control for us to take 2 hours rest. So till now, they were not taking rest. So now they could take 2 hours rest in rotation. But we still had a tremendous leak somewhere below the waterline. And on checking, I found that nearly all boats' main rib frames were smashed down to the keel. Keel is the bottom of the boat. So, in fact, there was nothing holding up a whole section of the starboard hull except a few cupboard partitions. So, some cupboard partitions were there to support the starboard side. So, we had survived for 15 hours since the wave hit. But Wave Walker wouldn't hold. Now, the boat would not hold together long enough for us to reach Australia. So, they had planned to reach Australia. I checked our charts and calculated that there were two small islands a few hundred kilometers to the east. Our only hope was to reach these pinpricks in the vast ocean. So why they are called pinpricks? Because they were on the scale of suppose 30 centimeter. If you make some dots and you are saying that these are the islands which we had to go. And if they miss that, now you can see that they would not be able to come back. And they were the only hope for survival. But unless the wind and seas abated so we could hoist our sail, so our chances would be slim indeed. The great wave had put our auxiliary engine out of action. So main engine was working, but the subsidiary auxiliary were not working at all. On January 4th, after 36 hours of continuous pumping, we reached the last few centimeters of water. Now we had only to keep pace with the water still coming in. So we could not set any sail on the mainmast. Pressure on the rigging would simply pull the damaged section of the hull apart. So we hoisted the storm jib and headed for where I thought the two islands were. Mary found some corned beef and cracker biscuits, and we ate our first meal in almost 2 days. But our respite was short-lived. But their relief was for some time only. At 4 p.m., black clouds began building up behind us. Within the hour, the wind was back to 40 knots and the seas were getting higher. The weather continued to deteriorate throughout the night, and by dawn, on January 5, our situation was again desperate. When I went in to comfort the children, John asked, Daddy, are we going to die? I tried to assure him that we could manage it. But Daddy, he went on, we aren't afraid of dying if we can all be together. You and Mummy, Sue and I. I could find no words with which to respond. But I left the children's cabin determined to fight the sea with everything I had. To protect the weakened starboard side, I decided to heave to, with the undamaged port hull facing the oncoming waves. Using an improvised sea anchor of heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels of paraffin. Paraffin is wax, you all know. So that evening, Mary and I sat together holding hands. As the motion of the ship brought more and more water in through the broken planks, we both felt the end was very near. But Wave Walker rode out the storm And by the morning of January 6th, with the wind easing, the winds were comfortable now. I tried to get a reading on the sextant. Sextant is an instrument to measure solid angles. So he took reading on that. Back in the chart room, I worked on the wind speeds, change of course, drift, and current in an effort to calculate our position. The best I could determine was that we were somewhere in 150,000 kilometers of ocean looking for 65-kilometer wide island. So now you can say that this is pinprick. These two were pinpricks on the map. So while I was thinking, Sue moved painfully, joined me. The left side of her head was now very swollen and her blackened eye narrowed to slits. She gave me a card she had made. On the front, she had drawn caricatures of Mary and me with the words, "Here are some funny people. Did they make you laugh?" I laughed a lot as well. Inside was a message, "Oh, how I love you both." So this card is to say thank you and let us hope for the best. Somehow we had to make it. I checked and rechecked my calculations. We had lost our main compass and I was using a spare which had not been corrected for magnetic variation. So I made an alliance. I added or subtracted something for this and another estimate for the influence of the westerly currents which flow through this part of the Indian Ocean. About 2 p.m., I went on deck and asked Larry to steer a course of 185 degrees. Now you can see that it was totally a U-turn. 185, 180 plus 5 degrees. So if we were lucky, I told him with a conviction I did not feel. He himself was not convinced, but still he convinced. So he said that he could expect to see the island at about 5 p.m. Then with a heavy heart, I went below, climbed on my bunk and amazingly dozed off. When I woke, it was 6 p.m. and growing dark. I knew we must have missed the island. And with the sail we had left, we couldn't hope to beat back into the westerly winds. At that moment, a tousled head appeared by my bunk. "Can I have a hug?" Jonathan asked. She was right behind him. "So why am I getting a hug now?" I asked. "Because you are the best daddy in the world, in the whole world, and the best captain," my son replied. "Not today, John, I'm afraid." "Why? You must be," sets you in a matter of fact voice, in confident voice, and telling as if it was a matter. "So you found the island? What?" I shouted. "It's out there in front of us," they chorused. They said together. So as big as a battleship. From a distance, it was looking like a battleship. I rushed on deck and gazed with relief at the stark outline of Isle Amsterdam. Isle Amsterdam was the French scientific base. So it was only a bleak piece of volcanic rock with little vegetation. The most beautiful island in the world. Why is said so? Because through that they are going to be saved. We anchored offshore for the night. They did not go in the evening or in the night. Why? Because they would be taken as enemy. So they waited for the morning. And the next morning, all 28 inhabitants of the island cheered as they helped us ashore. They helped us taking to the shore. With land under my feet again, my thoughts were full of Larry and Herbie. He was very emotional for Larry and Herbie. Cheerful and optimistic under the direst stress, and of Mary, who stayed at the wheel for all those crucial hours. Most of all, I thought of a 7-year-old girl who did not want us to worry about a head injury, which subsequently took 6 minor operations to remove a recurring means happening again and again, blood clot between skin and the skull, and of a 6-year-old boy who was not afraid to die.